All right. So, hi. My name is Vinny, or Vincent Higginbotham. I wrote the book, How Witchcraft Saved My Life, Practical Advice for Transformative Magic. Um, this is a book about using witchcraft to heal from trauma. And today, what I'm going to be talking about is literally that, using witchcraft to help heal from trauma. So, starting off, if you look at everybody's life, basically we all have traumas, right? From giving birth to being born to going through puberty, having a death in the family, even if your dog dies, like all of these things can be considered traumatic. And the thing that's the most amazing aspect of trauma is that nobody experiences trauma the same way. What might be traumatic to me could also not be traumatic to any of you. Maybe stubbing my toe is the most traumatic thing that's ever happened. But for me, it was a big deal because I never hurt myself, right? So trauma is relative, is what I'm trying to say. And that's not to say that stubbing your toe is the most traumatic thing that might ever happen to somebody, but that because it's relative, nobody, none of us are able to identify worth or apply worth to somebody else's trauma. And when we take that into consideration and we look at ways that we can heal from trauma, it also bears reasoning that nobody can say what is or is not worthy of healing from trauma. So oftentimes, when you're dealing with trauma, maybe it's sexual assault or a death of a loved one, I might want to say there's a little trigger warning here. We might talk about things that aren't comfortable because we're dealing with trauma. So just in case that stuff bothers you, be warned that maybe it comes up. Anyway, so when you're learning to heal from your trauma, you often are going to find that going to therapy, talking things out, maybe even art therapy, music therapy, different forms of expression are therapeutic for dealing with trauma, coming to terms with your trauma, finding yourself again after your trauma. All of these things matter, right? But for witches, what's really amazing is that we have access to something that a lot of other people don't, and that's an understanding of how magic works. So, in other words, when you look at the world around you, maybe the typical person is like, oh, that's a tree. But then oftentimes, probably not all witches, but many witches are going to say, well, that's a tree. That's a living thing. There's a life force in that. There's energy there. Maybe some people feel like it's sentient. Maybe some people don't. But at some point, most witches are connected to things like that, right? So we have this understanding of the universe that's a little different from a lot of people. And that's even if you're a Christian witch or a Jewish witch or a Hindu witch or an atheist witch, right? Like at the end of the day, we all understand energy. And so what we're able to do is use that to also help us deal. It's therapeutic, right? So some of the things that a witch might do to use magic to help them heal from trauma would I got like a list of 8 things. And so that would be using awareness, whether it's self-awareness or spiritual awareness, using your intuition. So getting in touch with your clear senses, getting in touch with your physical senses, being aware of your behavior, things like that. Then there's rules. Understanding rules of magic is really important if you want to use witchcraft to help heal from trauma, because it's not going to look all the same for everyone. Oftentimes, we are going to have unique understandings of how magic works. And because we have unique understandings of how magic works, what will work for me to help me heal from my trauma is not necessarily going to work for you or Joe down the road, right? Then, I mean, this seems like it would be a no-brainer, but it's probably not. Using protection magic to help heal from trauma can be super beneficial because it's going to give you kind of a peace of mind, but it's also going to set up ramparts that allow you to be comfortable and confident in the situations that you're in. Divination can be used to help you heal from trauma, and that you can use it to search deeper inside of yourself. You can use it to search deeper inside of your situation. And you could also use it to help seek out guidance for finding that healing aspect, or that healing process that you can go through with your magic. So using divination to identify the magic to use is definitely a way to use divination to help you heal. And then obviously you always have to do the work. I feel like I'm saying a lot, and if I am, I'm sorry. I'm just going to go ahead and say that now. So anyway, doing all of the work, the mundane work, is super important. So the reason that that goes in with this, even though it doesn't seem very magical, is that you can't do magic and then expect the whole world to fall at your feet and give you exactly what you're asking for in your magic. You have to do the work. And I'm going to dive deeper into all of these here in a minute. The last two things that I think are really important for using witchcraft to help you heal from trauma is practice. Practice, practice, practice. If you are not practicing how to use your magic, how to align your energies to help you heal, then you're not doing the work that's necessary on a magical front in order to get to that place that you're trying to get. And then finally, gratitude. I think that this is a no-brainer. It might not be for everybody. I think that gratitude is one of the most important things that you could do as a witch, because when you're saying yes, thank you, then you're letting yourself know that you're thankful for something. You're letting the source or the universe or whatever you want to call it, your deity, you're letting that know that you're thankful and that you're aware that you're receiving something. And not only that, but when you give gratitude, specifically in the face of trauma or in the middle of trauma, you are then taking the power back from whatever's happening. You're realigning your energies and your state of mind, and you're saying, this is not a thing that I'm going to accept, and I can be thankful for these things, for this and this and this reason. So diving into all 8 of those much deeper, we're going to talk about awareness. To be aware is such a tricky thing, because when you're aware, you know what's going on, right? But like, that's in a physical world. When you look at it from a spiritual or even emotional or self-aware kind of point of view, it's all about acknowledging where you're at now. So in self-awareness, that doesn't mean that you have to be perfect, that you can't yell at your husband or get in a fight with your girlfriend, or, you know, hate somebody at work, right? Being self-aware is understanding that you're doing those things, and then at some point understanding why you're doing those things. Now, when you look at that, you're going to ultimately realize that maybe your trauma, not always, right? Because trauma affects everyone differently, but maybe your trauma is what's for like pushing this kind of behavior out. I know personally, when I'm getting mad at my husband, it's always because I have this traumatizing life of abandonment, and then I think he's going to leave me, or I think he doesn't love me, or whatever, right? Well, that's myself. That's me. He's not actually doing anything to make me feel that way, except for being himself, his authentic self. So when I recognize that this is my authentic self, and I acknowledge it and assess the situation from a point of view that I need to be aware of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, I'm able to then change my behavior. This works on a spiritual level as well. So in magic, we connect spiritually or energetically to things. So being aware of how your energy or your spiritual self is feeling, thinking, behaving, vibing, whatever you want to call it, whatever level all of that is on, being aware of that is going to help you raise or lower it to the place that you need it to be in order to work the magic that you need to work to help heal whatever it is that you're working on healing. After that, when we look deeper into things, we have our intuition. So with intuition, it's really important to think about it from a mundane point of view. So with intuition, you very much might have a gut feeling, right? Like everyone in the mundane world, outside of the witchy world, they're like, oh, I knew it. Or, man, I knew I should have taken that turn, and things like this, right? That's their intuition. And so we in the more metaphysical world, the esoteric world, we understand that as an intuition, but I don't know that everyone always does. So having an understanding of that, and then understanding that our intuition speaks to us through our clear senses or our magical senses, can allow us to open ourselves up to those messages. And how that can help us heal from our traumas is, let's say you have, or somebody has had a sexual trauma, like a sexual attack, right? And maybe a certain incense was burning, or a certain kind of alcohol was on the person's breath. And then you smell that alcohol or that incense, and you're taken back, you're triggered into that moment. What's really happening is probably not that moment. You're probably not about to be a victim again. And you might be at a bar with all your friends and you smell vodka and you're like, this reminds me of my trauma. So using your intuition, tapping into that spiritual self that hears the voice of the universe, that allows you to tap into your magical senses, tapping into that and reading the room with your intuition can help to dial down the trigger. And in that way, you're able to use this magical aspect to kind of bring you back to where you need to be in order to not go off the deep end or have a panic attack or, like be triggered. Additionally, using your magical senses, like your clear sense of smell in a situation like that might also help you sometimes, not always, but it might also help you reassess your situation and then change that trigger, because now you're like, all right, well, I'm smelling this, but I'm having this great time. Next time I smell this, I'm going to remember this great time that I'm having. And you're basically going to set your intuition to understand the great time. It's almost like working with your mind to like trick it, but in a way you can set the intention with your senses in order to do that. Rules are a really big thing in the witching world for a lot of people. There are ways to access the mysteries. You've got to open a circle this way or that way. You've always got to open a circle. You never open a circle. You don't do anything that you don't want to come back to you 3 times, and all of this stuff. Like, witch books in particular are full of information on how to use the moon. So for this example, we're really going to dive into that. The moon changes, obviously, and we know that, many of us know that when it's waxing, it's a good time to call things in. When it's waning, it's a good time to send things away. Well, what happens if I need to send something away while the moon is waxing? What do I do? Here's this rule that now I got to figure out how to work around, right? You break the rule. You break the damn thing. Because first, you understand how the rule works. So understanding how a magical rule works allows you to adapt any work that you have to do to fit that moon. The energy is to bring something in, but you're thinking, I need to send out this abusive relationship, right? No, what you do is you call in a healthy relationship. You call in a solution during this time. Instead of waiting for that moon to be right, you make your intention work with the energies that are present. The other side of that coin is, if you understand the rule, any rule, and it doesn't resonate for you or it doesn't work with what you're doing, don't pay attention to the rule. Your magic is going to be based off of what you're doing also. So if you're trying to heal from trauma and something seems like it makes a lot of sense to you, like burning pine needles are going to protect you, if that really makes sense to you and it's something that's everywhere around you and you're like, this is going to work, then do that. Who cares what the correspondences are on pine needles if they're not about protection, right? Or if they're not about whatever it is that you're trying to do, but it resonates with you and it works for you, then you do that, because your magic is telling you how to behave. So understanding rules and breaking them is a really important part. Knowing how to break them or understanding why you could break them is a really important part of using magic to help you heal from traumatic experiences. Earlier, I had said protection is probably a no-brainer, but in hindsight, I probably shouldn't say things like that. So protection might not be a no-brainer for using it to heal yourself from trauma, because maybe people are like, well, I'm safe now, so why do I need to protect myself? But what are the things that you can protect yourself from, right? We can protect ourselves from people's energy. We can protect ourselves from the mundane world. We can protect ourselves from ourselves. We can protect ourselves from spiritual attack. We can protect ourselves from simple things like anxiety. So maybe you are like, oh man, like I'm going to be around a bunch of people, but I'm always anxious. And maybe this is derived from a trauma that you've experienced. Cast a spell to help relieve you of your anxiety, or cast a spell to bring in whatever the antithesis is of your anxiety. If it is, I find joy being around people, then bring that in. Or if you just simply need to send that anxiety away, you can write it out and burn it. Or you can do any number of things that you could magically try to remove that from your life with. This is protection magic, because you're protecting yourself from a feeling that you might have being around people. Coincidentally, protection magic is also going to put up walls if you don't want people getting in and having their energy mingle with yours. If you are not trying to let somebody's mood affect you, you can use all of these things. And sometimes simple incantations or poems that you speak to yourself in those moments can be really helpful. But identifying the fact that you are protecting yourself from something helps set the intention that you now have a boundary or a barrier. And it also gives you peace of mind. And oftentimes, especially when dealing with trauma, being triggered by something comes from not having peace of mind, from not feeling completely comfortable with something somebody might say or do, right? So having that protection set up is possible. It's possible that that's going to then give you a boundary and give you some peace of mind that helps you feel that the magic is doing its job, and then gives you that almost subconscious feeling of relief. Divination is another really great way to kind of dive in to the things that you're experiencing. What that would look like is, for instance, I have experienced a lot of homelessness in my life. I've been living with a disease for over a decade, and I have a lot of abandonment. So when I'm feeling like any of that stuff is really digging in on me or trying to work its way in and kind of, ruin my day, I can turn to my cards, or I can turn to my bones, or I can turn to whatever form of divination I choose to use, right? Smoke scrying, mirror scrying, whatever. Turn to that divination and seek guidance. I can say things like, how can I ensure that I won't ever be homeless again? How can I ensure that this situation I'm about to step into is good for me? How can I, do whatever it is that I need to do? But then also, what path lays ahead of me? Like, what can I expect out of going to this party? I'm feeling this kind of way, right? So like you can call out for the answers and the guidance that you might need, and then ultimately receive it through divination. Once you receive it through divination, it's all about listening to the message that you've received, though, because at the end of the day, if you're using divination for self-awareness and you are not listening when it's like, stop yelling at your husband, then you're causing the problem at that point. So it's really about identifying the things that you're doing, using the divination and everything, but then paying attention to what's being told to you. And that comes up here in a second with doing the work. So when you're doing the work, what that means is that you haven't just done your divination and you're like, hey, how do I stop yelling at my husband? And it's like, well, give him some leeway. Maybe you get the temperance card and it's telling you to just like kind of sit back and take a respite for a minute and just give yourself more time to assess the situation. But then you just go flying into your next argument without paying attention to the cards. Well, you haven't done the work. That's literally what that is. You have not, you did the magic. That's great. But then the work comes in your mundane world, because at the end of the day, magic is not going to do anything if you're not doing it yourself. The universe smiles upon people who are tenaciously aiming to get what they want, right? So, for instance, I always wanted to write a book. I was 8 years old. I was like, oh, I'm going to write a book. And now, 40 years old. I'm 40 years old, and this just came out. That's tenacity. That's me working all the time to try and reach this goal. That's me going through trauma and coming out the other side and saying, oh, I can use this. How do I put this to work, right? How do I do the real world work to get that magic to do what I need it to do? I can do road openers. I can do everything. But if I don't write the damn book, nobody's going to publish me, right? Like, I have to do the work. So the mundane actions that are needed are imperative in order to get what you need out of your magic. The second to final thing, we're getting close to the end. I'm really sorry about that. But the second to final thing would be practice. You have got to practice. Practice, practice, practice. And that's not to say every day you need to pull tarot cards. Every day you need to go out and ground. Every day you need to this. Every day you need to that. No, I don't believe in that, because I don't believe in rules. Like, I'm not going to follow your rules. I'm going to follow mine. And my rules are totally fluid. I'm going to be like, today is all about deity worship or deity working with, right? Working with the deity. And then tomorrow might be all about tarot. And then the next day, it could be a completely different thing. So it doesn't mean I'm not practicing if it doesn't look the same way every day. It means that I have a dynamic practice that's formidable, and that I can fluctuate through the things that I'm doing. But what matters is that every day I'm doing something, some kind of magic, some kind of mundane work that helps me work toward healing myself. Plain and simple. And then finally, there's gratitude. So gratitude's a big one. With gratitude, you are afforded an opportunity to stop, to breathe, to take in all of the great things that you have going on in your life. So sometimes if I'm feeling anxious, I might stop and go, what are 3 things that I'm thankful for right this second? And it could be the shoes on my feet, or the sun in the sky, or the leaf that just fell from a tree. It doesn't matter. It's about me taking that moment, being in that moment, and finding things right there, right then, that I'm grateful for. And often when I stop and do that, I'm able to reel that anxiety in a bit and get myself to a different place that allows me to move forward, right? So that's one way using gratitude can help you heal from trauma. Because as you go through this, if you're triggered by something and you use that, it could help. It's not all of these things are going to help all the time, because everyone is different. Everybody handles things differently, processes things differently. So if this one thing doesn't work, then try something else, right? But another really great way that gratitude has helped me in my daily practice and healing from trauma and everything is stopping and being thankful for the crap that I have gone through. So I can stop and I can be like, I'm so thankful that I was homeless for a decade, because I'm not homeless now. And that's great now, because years later, I'm like, all right, cool. I'm not homeless anymore. I'm thankful that I was homeless. But when I was homeless, I was thankful for things. I was thankful for the sandwich that I maybe got to eat, or the cigarette that I got to smoke, right? The small things that I could be thankful for. And then when you're out of the trauma and you're looking back and you're dealing with the repercussions of living through that trauma, that's when you look at it and you try to find the things that you're grateful for from the trauma. That can be really difficult, especially with things like sexual assault or physical violence, abuse of any sort. Those things make it difficult for you to look and say, oh, I'm thankful for this. But I have a past with an abusive stepmother. And when I look at it and I go, I'm so thankful that I experienced her so I know how not to treat my kids now. That's a way that you can then turn it, find gratitude in the trauma, and then you have now taken back the power. You're not a victim anymore. You're a student. You learned something. You're able to say, "Oh, I'm thankful that this went down the way it did, because now I'll never treat my kid that way. Now I'll never drive down the road that way." You know, whatever your trauma was, when you can look at the lesson that you learned from it, and there's always a lesson, always, you can then be grateful for that lesson and use that in order to help heal from your trauma. With that said, before we open this up for any kind of Q&A, I just want to say none of this stuff is replacement for therapy. Obviously, if you need therapeutic help or medical help, you should always seek that out, and like seek help in general. Otherwise, I'm ready to open this up for Q&A for the next 5 minutes if we want to. I was told that there's a little bit of a lag, so I'm just going to wait until I see the first question pop up. All right, Patty asks, Vincent, are you a blessing? And she says that I'm a blessing and a miracle. Well, listen, Patty, thanks. Like, I really appreciate that. I mean, I feel like everyone is. Lots of thank yous. Guys, thank you. You guys are being so nice to me. Inspiring. Thank you. Lynn feels like I'm inspiring. That's really great. Samantha is asking if I recommend any books on the subject. Yeah, it's called How Witchcraft Saved My Life, Practical Advice for Transformative Magic. I wrote it. I highly suggest reading that. But also there are other books. Meg Rosenbreyer has a great book on using witchcraft to heal. And then Mandy M has a great book on witchcraft therapy. These are like two people that I totally align with because we're on the same track with healing through magic. How do you work when your mental health prevents you? Okay, so Fern, that's a really good question. How do you work when your mental health prevents you? So sometimes our minds can get in the way, right? And if you're not able to get out of that situation, whatever you feel like is going to work for you is one of the best ways to do whatever you need. So like, my mental health doesn't really get in the way. I couldn't speak on that too much because if I have anxiety and I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to go do this to work with my anxiety. So it's all kind of like trial and error when it comes to it, because you have to just kind of keep going until you find something. So I think the main thing, Fern, that you should remember if your mental health is getting in the way is persistence. If one thing doesn't work, it doesn't mean that nothing's going to work. Keep trying other things. Courtney liked the mental health question. Let me see if I missed any questions. What do you use for protection spells? Natalie B is asking what I use for protection spells. So with protection spells, what I like to do is several different things. Sometimes I use baneful magic. Sometimes I use honey jars. It just depends on what kind of protection I need, right? So like I have apotropic things that I keep in my car that keep me protected when I'm driving. I wear apotropic jewelry that helps protect me from illness, like my abracadabra necklace and my key. They both help protect me from illness and help protect me from like poverty, things like that. So I use several different things and I wear them like a shield, but also like sometimes you can just project the intention out and allow yourself to feel your protection from there. So it's just whatever works for you. Really, it is whatever works for you. I can't tell you what's going to work for you. Okay, thanks, Julia. She feels like I'm personable. That's nice. Okay, so we have a suggestion on another book that might be helpful with Protection Magic by Tess Whitehurst. There's a magic and healing personal story. You guys are so nice. Let's see this. Ed Jordan said, I came in late, but I thought I thoroughly enjoyed what you had to say. Did you talk about a certain tarot set, or is it what you were? I did not. I did not talk about a certain tarot set. I'm not particularly set on anything tarot wise. It's about time for me to wrap up, though. So that's the end. I can't believe I made it 30 minutes. It's awesome. Thanks so much for attending, everybody. I really appreciate it.